thank you. Thank you for inviting me. A lot of thanks to ACCIÓN, to the board, and to the management, and to all who are working at ACCIÓN. I'm very, very honored to be here. It's my first time in Chile. And Chile is a country I felt always attracted to, not only because I've now realized that it is quite high on the Global Peace Index, despite maybe lingering mistrust in the society at the moment, not only because it has a beautiful landscape, not only because it has great people, but because I've been really, really inspired by 3 people of Chilean origin. And the first one is Isabel Allende. I was inspired by her because her stories are able to touch the humanness in the reader and actually show that we are all on a quest for meaning and purpose in life. And the second is Humberto Maturana, whom I had the chance to meet yesterday, which was absolutely great. I was inspired by him and my work because he developed a so-called Santiago theory of cognition about the process of life and the process of living. And that really inspired my work because he said life is a constant, huge, interconnected, interactive, collaborative self-making. So I thought we got to learn something from Humberto Maturana. If we want to create a world that is sustainable, if we want to create a world that works for 100% of humanity and the planet as a whole. And the third person was Francesco Varela, who passed away a while ago. I read his book, Ethical Know-How, and a lot of other things from him, but that book particularly inspired me because he advanced the idea that human nature, in its biological origin, in its depth, is actually caring, compassionate, virtuous, ethical, and cooperative. So both say life is collaborative, and we better learn something. Varela said, and I thought that is a quote that I would like to show. He said it is as if we were born already knowing how to play the violin, and I had to practice with great exertion in order to remove the habits that prevent us from displaying that virtuosity. So if you look at the previous presentations, there is a lot of collaboration already taking place, and we need to look a little bit deeper. I'm also happy that I'm part of a global community of change makers. As we're sitting or standing in this room, there are many, many people in the world that I know that really go the extra mile for sustainability. And these are not dreamers, although dreaming may be at times really important for sustainability. These are people who actually do the job every day. And lots of them are in the world. They collaborate, they work together, they network, there is a connectivity. And some people say, have we already maybe achieved the tipping point where there are actually more people in the world who work for sustainability, we just don't know about it. And collaboration is a very, very important aspect because none of those people has got the one and only solution to the problems, so they actually need to work together. So now I would like to ask you, just for 30 seconds, not to throw over the program, think about a situation where you worked together with other people that may have been in your family life, preparing a wedding or getting something sorted out for the kids. It may be something at work, it may be a big project, it may be preparing this conference, it may have been a huge change process in a community, it may be something in government, it may be getting something done in your business. Think about a situation where you collaborated with others and it was fun. It was exhilarating, it was great. Think about that for 30 seconds. Turn to your neighbor and talk about it. Turn to your neighbor and start talking about that situation. How did it feel? How did you feel in that situation? Are you talking to your neighbors? Talk to your neighbors. This is the chance of your lifetime. Say hello, give a kiss on the cheek, talk to your neighbor. Okay, I need to interrupt you. Although I know that these are the conversations that we need to have. Because these are the conversations that get us into the feeling how it is to collaborate, how it is to work together, and how it is to feel invigorated, to feel more alive when people start supporting each other, when people start throwing in ideas, and when actually you get things done. Somebody said, you can be exhausted at the end of the day. That's perfectly all right if you've achieved something together and not only alone. So just keep that feeling just for the next 15 minutes. And then, you can drop it somewhere, but keep that feeling. Because I do believe it is important. People say the world is in trouble, and it may be so, but it is important to know or to re-know what we already know. And I do think Francesca Varela is right. We need to uncover what we are capable of as human beings. In another way, we can say we need to travel together. And I love this African proverb that's being cited all around the world now, more and more. If you want to travel fast, travel alone. If you want to travel far, travel together. If we look at the sustainability challenges of the world, we need to travel together. We cannot find solutions in silo thinking. We cannot find solutions only as government, only as business. When we look at the business, and I know you may be familiar with the VUCA world, those of you who are in business, you kind of the uncertain, the volatile, the VUCA complex. It is amazing how collaboration can actually invigorate the productivity within companies, but also in regional development, in community development, and how it can develop a step-by-step moving into a different world making. Yet, the world is in trouble. That is also true. There are challenges that we need to address collectively, and they're huge challenges. There may be water scarcity, there may be climate change, there may be social unrest, there may be refugee crisis. I'm German, we're dealing with that at the moment, and it's a huge challenge to society. It is a positive challenge, but it is a challenge, and a challenge that can only be addressed collectively. So, I have been to a meeting a couple of weeks ago. That was a meeting of Club of Rome members, and Club of Rome members are seasoned experts, I tell you. I mean, they really know. They've done a lot of research on the state of the world. They have plotted plans. They are consulting governments. So I would say this was a meeting of game changers for sustainability in the world. And we had a fierce debate about the state of the world. That was more or less easy to agree. But when it came to discussing what would be the way we could plot forward, what we could do, what would be the strategies and the leverage points, I tell you, it was a nightmare. We could not agree. People would attack each other and say, but, you probably know that, but. And they would talk behind each other's back over the coffee break. We're all human. That happens. That is also part of life. So there was a fierce debate going on until somebody finally got up and said, guys, there are mostly guys in the Club of Rome. So he said, guys, what if it isn't necessary to find the one and only solution? Maybe it isn't necessary to find the one leverage point. Maybe it isn't necessary that there is a consolidated strategy to the change in the world. Maybe we cannot agree on that. Maybe we first need to understand how the world works, how life works in an interconnected way, and we need to change a narrative. And that is a narrative about how we can co-create a world that works for 100% of humanity and the planet as a whole. And we may just see each other in that vast collaborative system and lots of subsystems down to the country, down to communities, down to local action groups, down to businesses, down to departments in businesses. But if we see each other as part of a big collaborative system, then a shift might be happening. And the most important thing, he says, is we may need to acknowledge the multiplicity of approaches. Maybe there isn't one solution for the world, but we need to actually encourage the many different solutions. Then we need to inspire each other, we need to discuss with each other, we need to criticize each other, and we need to learn from each other, we need to collaborate. And that is probably going to make a difference. So every of the journeys into global change, and I believe all of us, as we are in this room, do the tiny little steps on this journey, the collaborative journey into a global change. You know, every of these journeys starts with the humble beginnings, and I just thought I would like to share my story. I grew up in the western part of Berlin, pretty close to the border, and it might sound like from a history book, because you can't imagine if you know Berlin today, but Berlin was an enclave. There was a fierce war. And I was growing up in West Berlin, and I wasn't supposed to go to East Berlin. I could go to West Germany, but it was always like a lot of fear, you know, to go over the border, etc. So when I was playing outside in the fields, and we were pretty close to the border, at some stage I could hear a shooting from the border. And then when I went home and asked my dad, what was this noise? He said, you know, these are soldiers. They're shooting people who want to cross the border. I didn't ask any further questions. But as a child, I started daydreaming. I started daydreaming that people in East and West Berlin would take each other at their hands and would just walk over the border and would have fun, enjoy, and dance. And that dream that I dreamt was in 1966. 23 years later, my dream came true. It was not because I dreamt it. Who am I? But it must have been because there were so many people who had a dream for a better situation, not just a selfish interest. And they got together and they led the change collectively, and they created, with that act together, a lot of change in the world. Because that fall of the Berlin Wall had a huge impact in the world. So that faculty, that human faculty to actually get together, to overcome difficulties, to persist long enough when things are getting really tough and difficult, to support each other in a collaborative change process, that never left my mind. It fascinated me. So, not surprisingly, my professional work was all in helping people to cross borders in a metaphorical sense. So I then began, I'm a psychologist and an organizational psychologist, and I began to go in cooperation management, and I looked more and more in cross-sector collaboration and in collaboration within companies, and I always looked at how can one not dissolve structures, but how can one make people talk with each other in a different way. So that really fascinated me. So I more and more actually accompanied global and national and local change initiatives of people who couldn't solve a problem by themselves, who couldn't solve things in silence or in administrative procedures. And there was water scarcity problems in Tunisia, or small-scale enterprise development in Senegal, or public-private dialogue in Rwanda, or the establishment of a global sustainability standard for coffee or another standard for maritime wildlife. And there were people who needed to work together that didn't want to work together in the beginning. So it wasn't all like collaboration is great. And it was certainly not about harmony. People who are fighting like no tomorrow. And I just said, I remember a meeting in Cartagena where the NGO said, it was about a global coffee value chain. The NGO said, no, we're leaving, the industry is never going to support small-scale farmers. We're going to leave that meeting. And then one day later, the industry group says, we're fed up, because the demands of the NGOs are too high, we can't go further, etc. And then finally, they got together and found a solution. And then one day, a manager of a global company came to me and said, Petra, when this collaboration magic happens, it's actually a shift in the room. You can feel it. Something is happening. And it has the effect that you would not withhold your position, but you would make sure that you stay in the collaborative field. There was almost like an invisible boundary around the people who collaborated. And you would make sure that you stay in that collaborative field. And you somehow, it was as if a responsibility kicked in. You didn't want to make this next step towards sustainability fail. So I thought, this is amazing. What I did, I continued to accompany people and observed and observed and observed. What happens? What are the conditions under which that magic of collaboration actually happens? And parallel to that, I reread Umberto Maturana and Francesca Varela, and I went into systems theory and made a deep dive in really looking at biological systems and what is known. And what I came up with is actually to say, yes, there are certain conditions under which I would say collaboration and constructive collaboration becomes more likely. Nobody's perfect, we're all human. Collaboration is going to be continuing to be difficult. So I would like to take you through because it's quite amazing. I discovered that, and interesting, it was mentioned on the panel before, if people connect to a future, then they are more likely to stay in a collaborative field. So we need to nurture that sense of future possibilities. If we get stuck in the reality, it's not going to work. The second, I also think it was at least touched by somebody on the panel, is collaboration and a change requires reliable engagement processes. And I want to emphasize the word process because people underestimate how important it is to design processes and why reliable process, when I, as a government, consult with the population and I have a reliable process where people know this is going to happen now, I'm going to listen to you now, and this is how your recommendations are going to be integrated in that strategy paper, and that strategy paper is going to go into consultation, etc. If you build a structured process, and the same happens to companies, within companies and in value chain cooperation, that creates trust. So trust is gained. You can't accuse people of not having trust. Trust is gained. So reliable engagement processes are extremely important. But there's another element. People want to be creative. And okay, you can't be always creative, yeah? Because there are bureaucratic procedures and there are management requirements, etc. But once people have the feeling, I'm part of something new, then it's much easier for them to not just get stuck in their positions, but actually contribute to something new and say, okay, I got a good idea, but you also got a good idea, so maybe we can put the two ideas together and then work together for whatever change process is important. And there's another element on innovation that I would like to stress because it was also mentioned here. People actually have a desire for mastery. So it is important to equip people with capacities and skills and education because people love to be good, we thrive on accomplishments. There's another element that I discovered that was Too obvious, yet it is exactly the element that gets always neglected and very often sidelined. If people meet as people, if it is possible that people acknowledge each other and develop a mutual respect without harmony, without agreeing, but a respect for each other, and see this is a person who's also pursuing dreams and has difficulty with a son at school. If people meet as people and understand their journey, understand where people are coming from, it is easier to stay in the collaborative field. We live in a house of language. People communicate. And it was also said on the panel, it is a crucial importance for collaboration processes that there are spaces for structured dialogues and that are deliberate and clear and transparent. And the rule is very, very clear. The rule number 1 is listen. The rule number 2 is listen. And the rule number 3 is listen. And then tell stories and make sure other people can tell stories. Listen to concern and grievances goes a long way. Listening to breakthrough ideas has changed entire businesses. Listening is creating a space in which people can move towards collaboration much more easier. The last is an important one because my experience is the moment people can connect to a larger story and say, it isn't just that little context. I've had a situation in Senegal where all people supporting small-scale enterprise, and they were fighting with each other like no tomorrow and correcting and criticizing each other until somebody says, guys, the entire economy of Senegal hinges on small-scale entrepreneurs. We must support them together. That was a bit of a shift. So it is when people connect to larger stories, they can actually come out of their trenches and see, wait a minute, there's a landscape here. And then they will not completely stop fighting, but at least they are able to say, wait a minute, this is the position, but there must be a new solution that we can find with it. So my experience is that people live interconnectivity. People live stories. People tell us, and we get up in the morning, and what gets us up is meaning and purpose. And that is important for societal development. It is important for business. And it is important to acknowledge as a faculty of each human being. And it is at the cornerstone of productivity because it's that feeling of aliveness that we get from successful collaboration that actually makes us more productive. So what does it mean for business or the next regional planning or a community development or whatever? Because I've worked quite a lot with high-level leaders in industry and in government, and what I can't do, I can't come to them with a quote from Umberto Maturana and say, the world is a vast interconnected system. Then they say, thank you, but I need to solve my immediate problem. That's why I have developed the collective leadership compass as a kind of meta-level guiding structure, because it translates essential life principles into a compass, and it helps and empowers people to translate the compass in their business or whatever government, NGO, next task, reality. So it may look differently to look at the different dimensions. But the crucial point is you need to pay attention to each of the dimensions, take them as entry points, and make sure that you work with them. And how could this look like? Take just one example. If you develop a strategy, better is co-develop a strategy. Make sure it is a vision that speaks to the hearts of people. I believe every business in the world can look at how it makes a difference for the common good. for the life on the planet. And the moment people in that business feel we're actually making a contribution to society, they change their motivation, and with the motivation, they change their productivity. Engage internal and external stakeholders. As I said, trust goes a long way with a solid process architecture. And make sure you build connectivity within companies, between community organizations, etc. And make sure people are in, it was mentioned here, collective action teams, where they accomplish something together because it is the result that keeps people going. Acknowledge the creative urge, support education, support capacity building and mastery, because people want to learn something new and they want to create something new. Welcome the whole person at work, because that is of crucial importance, that people don't have to leave their doubts and their pains at home, but also not their happiness at home, so that they can enter the door and say, I'm here as a whole person. And make sure that you build a structure for dialogue that is extremely important. Just an example that is a bit of a threatening example. I once worked for BP. Okay, I've said it now, for BP, okay. Okay, so I just wanted to say an oil company, so let's just take the oil company. So I worked, and it was quite interesting. They had a huge problem in one of their refineries, and that was a security problem, a safety problem. They were just like sliding towards disasters, you know, every now and then, and the public didn't know, and they tried to, you know, to get this going. And, you know, there was a huge clash between the workers' unions and the management, and they couldn't get anything going. And particularly there was a culture where people were terribly afraid to report mistakes, because the culture was that you know, the messenger would get shot. Yeah? So nobody reported mistakes. So mistakes were aggravating, and nobody would be reporting mistakes. And then, you know, something happened, and, you know, it was a whole emergency management. So, and that manager said, dialogue is our only way into the future. We need to create that culture of dialogue within the refinery, otherwise we're not going to be successful in future. What they didn't do in the refinery, they didn't connect to a larger story of sustainability, which I think is a missing point. And I strongly recommend to you, make sure within companies, within government, make sure you are able to connect people to the larger story, to the context, to the society, to the world, to the global community that actually wants to create a planet that works for 100% of humanity and the planet. So, what has this to do with Umberto Maturana, Francesco Varela, and Isabel Allende? I do think that all three were on a journey, a kind of finding the deeper meaning of life, finding what aliveness is all about. Because aliveness is at the core of productivity. So with that, I would like to leave you with an inspirational quote from Grace Lee Boggs. She is an American revolutionary, and she turned 100 years. She passed away at the age of 100 last year. She's a social activist, and what she said is to be at that time on the clock of the universe when we can make that huge change from othering other people to feeling that they are part of us and we are part of them. That's a wonderful opportunity. It's a wonderful time to be alive. Thank you.